Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're talking about another feat. This time, alert.
I was alerted that we were doing this feat, and I was like, I don't remember having an opinion on this. And then I read it again. I was like, oh yeah, I don't like this one.
You don't, huh? I thought it was
Not
kind of neat.
really.
All right. Well, let's break it down. What does it do?
All right, got 3 lines of text. You can't be surprised while you're conscious. You gain +5 your initiative. Other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. So basically, invisible things that you are blind to, don't have attack rolls against you. That's kind of like the only text that matters. Kind of.
Well, I mean, the initiative. That's.
Eh,
Uh,
it's fine. Well, I'll talk about why I don't like initiative in a second.
okay.
But let's just do this in order. Yeah.
All right. Surprise.
Okay. So to talk about how surprise works means going into basically the foundation of initiative and when you roll initiative. So whenever a combat breaks out, the game master, the dungeon master, determines who might be surprised. If no one's being stealthy, both are aware of each other and no one's surprised. If one side is being stealthy and the other isn't, then there's like dex checks versus passive perception scores, versus some stuff. It's normally just dex stealth versus perception, passive perception scores, and that determines who is surprised or not. This basically says I don't need to be perceptive to not be surprised anymore, and I will always be acting in the first round of combat, the surprise round as it's often referred to as, because it's just round 1 of combat where some people don't take actions because they are surprised, and you are immune to that. Fundamentally, that doesn't happen that often. It'll happen in the lowest tier of play pretty often because they're like, these are the bandit jumps on you from the shadows over whenever you're guiding the caravan or whatever, or you're going into the goblin caves and they come down from the rafters, right? But once you get out of that tier, once you're into like the mid or upper tiers, you start doing more big, scarier threats. You start literally ballooning up the size of the monsters you're fighting against. You start fighting against things that are larger and scarier. Oftentimes, you're fighting against things with very different forms of tactics than ambuscade, like get them from the corners of the world. So surprise ends up being more of a thing you're trying to get more than something you're trying to not have happen to you. And there are a lot of ways to not be surprised as well. There are a myriad of things, like just having someone with observant probably means you're never getting surprised ever again, because they're going to be like, oh, hey, be aware there's things around us. And then it's very hard for the DM to be like, well, you're surprised because you weren't aware of exactly where they were coming from. Be like, no, we knew that there were goblins nearby. We knew that there were, frost giant trackers nearby. It's pretty apparent that they were. It's kind of a shitty thing for you to be like, no, you're surprised here anyway. So that to me is a line of text that gets worse as the game goes on. Isn't that great even whenever you like can start with it? And on the whole, is just I'm not impressed by it. Because again,
I'm not super excited about the surprise either.
Okay, but you are excited about the initiative.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, all right, go ahead.
Initiative is funky. So initiative is funky because it will out the gate sort of determine whether or not one side gets one extra action. And that's going to be determined on when the other side dies. So whenever you roll initiative for the first time, you go into a list, and that list just loops, which means once it's established, the only advantage to having a high initiative is you've acted one time prior to everyone else. So the higher initiative you have is you will have medial advantages in the first round over everyone else, up into the point where they don't take another turn. So if you get like a 26 on your initiative, for example, and you have something that's 23 on initiative, if you kill it before it takes its turn, huge advantage. Game warping power, very, very useful. You negated all of that thing's turns. If it takes its turn, there's no longer any advantage there. And now we're into a basic, every single time you go back and forth, if it is ever taking another turn, no inherent advantage is being gained. And that'll kind of go through with everything else. And because you're working in a team party environment, the longer the fights go on, the more menial this advantage gets, the less impactful it ends up being. In very high stakes gameplay, in gameplay with high lethality, where burst builds are the centerfold of attention, where you have your assassin, rogue, paladin, multi-class cheese builds doing 500 damage in a single shot, and the entire game is warped around everyone killing each other in the first round of initiative, this is a hugely important thing. Outside of that, if your fights go 4 or 5 rounds, going before other members of your party isn't normally that impactful, especially on characters like rogues and stuff, who I often think are the kind of characters that think about alert. It's often detrimental. Normally, you like going after other people to do setup,
Right.
so they set you up to do certain things. So you get
Yeah.
other people creating environments that you're willing to go into. Oftentimes, you want the monster to approach you so you can move and hit them. Right? Like there are going to be a lot of times where it's not strictly advantageous to go first. It often is advantageous to go first, but it isn't worth a feat for it. I don't think I think a +1 dex is way better than a +5. A +1 dex gives you +1 to your initiative and gives
Doesn't give you +5.
It doesn't give you +5, but it does give you +1 to more than 5 things. It gives you +1 to dex saves, it gives you +1 to a whole bunch of other things, but I think it's way better.
Generally, yes. Yeah, and I knew you were going to bring up the loop thing. However, you already mentioned if you can take someone out of the fight with that's impactful. Also, I'm not even thinking about attacking. If you're going to cast a protective spell or something, negating a bunch of attacks that would come at the party, I feel like that's also impactful. You could be the one keeping one of your guys down from going down in the first round of a fight. I think initiative has its place as advantageous when if you get a character build specifically looking to take advantage of it.
I think a lot of time those builds, specifically the ones you're talking about protective measures, you're going to want to have prepped prior to combat. I think a lot of the really powerful prep stuff have longer durations than this, which makes it... I'm not saying those builds that you're saying suggestion don't exist. They do. There are many builds that will want to go first because they have a powerful prep spell like a haste that they want to get down before their fighter goes. That's valid. I don't know if I want to spend a whole ass feat to get that. I don't know if I want to delay my int going up. I don't know if I want to delay more important feats that it worked with my build
probably not,
to
but
justify a feat for it.
Trying to find the brighter side of this one.
Sure.
Now, that in combination with the surprise thing, I think makes it even a little bit better.
I think both are relatively menial, and that means the last line of text has to be really important. And to its credit, it's pretty good. Other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against being unseen by you is useful. It means you can do 2 ways, like a 1-way mirror in darkness, where things will have disadvantage on attacking you, and you will be at parity when attacking them while in total darkness because you're blinded, but they're blinded and don't get the advantage on the attack rolls against you. So that breaks parity in some specific cases. That's neat. More commonly, it'll just be, I don't care that they're in darkness. We're aware that they're there and them hitting me. Sure. I'm aware of their general existence. It doesn't bother me. Invisible creatures not getting advantage attack rolls against you, that's perfectly fine. I think this will be obviously at best on characters that want to get hit. The more times you are attacked, the more likely this is going to be something that you care about. So you want this on frontline paladins or something. You want this on your fighters. The problem with that is the martial characters really care about their feats. Their feats are really competitive in the martials, which alert isn't something you're ever considering whenever you're building a great weapon character. It's not something you're considering when you're building a sentinel character. It's not something you're thinking about when building a polearm master character. You also want your strength score and dex scores to be going up. You also sometimes want your con score to be going up. You want feats that tough, I think, is better keeping you alive than alert is. Now tough doesn't also give you +5 to your initiative, and you can't be surprised. But again, like we talked about, the surprise gets worse as the game goes on. The +5 initiative, I think, at its best, it's 1 free-ish. It's nebulous action in most counters, and that's powerful. It could be fine. I don't know if it justifies existing, especially if you're again, plus dex is probably just better for that. Because it gives you a slight uptick in that, and also a big uptick in a lot of other important things.
It's hard to say. If you got a high enough dex, you're probably going to be going pretty early in the initiative.
Yeah, right. Does an extra +5?
Do you need absolute first?
Yeah, I don't think you do. I think if you're getting a +5 anyway, you're probably in the top half of initiative. That's probably where you want to be. And I don't think going. And if you don't
have a crappy desk, then you might not even be guaranteeing yourself first.
Yeah, right. And if you roll a 2 or a 3, you're ah, shit, this feat does literally nothing for me. That's what it feels like, at least.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not very high on alert. I know a lot of people take it. Like if you're building a character, when do you consider taking this, Bob? Like, is this something that you're like, at 4th level this seems great, at 11th level this seems great? Is there a time you think that alert deserves its spot?
I don't know if I was going to take it, which I probably wouldn't, because I mean, just with the myriad of other feat options,
Yeah.
or like you said, just the bump up the ability scores options, then yeah. But if see, it would depend on, look, if I was going to take this, it would be for a specific build, and I guess early. I don't know. I don't have a specific build in mind, so
I
I'm just shooting in the dark here.
Sure. I think that there might be like maybe you're the Warlock Darkness build, maybe you're like I see through magical darkness and don't want things in darkness to have advantage on attack rolls against me for some reason, so that there's always a disadvantage on attacking you. But I mean, that build really cares about its charisma. It really cares about things like Warcaster and maintaining concentration on your effects. It really cares about like other feats. Most builds really care about their feats. Like it's really difficult to justify things like durable whenever other feats are just because they compete with your ability scores getting better. You need them to be pivotal to what you're doing for them to matter. I just don't think there are enough builds that exist that are like, maybe you're an assassin rogue, maybe there are a couple builds that are like you do more effective things when you act before creatures, where you go, okay, alert is a centerpiece in this. On those characters, I think you consider it. I think there's a ranger option even that does like the ambuscade thing really well, where it's like, yeah, whenever you act before someone in combat, you do a bonus d6 to your damage or whatever. And those builds, while that archetype isn't amazing, this is probably a feat that goes in that sheet. I
See,
just
I was
can't get
thinking
that excited
the
about it.
assassin rogue though. I'm thinking you want to be killing people before the fight begins.
The Assassin Rogue wants there to not be a fight. The Assassin
Yeah.
Rogue wants to pop down from the ceiling, one-shot the boss, and everyone goes, oh shit, we gotta bail. Our boss just took 180 damage at once, right? Like, that's the objective of the Assassin Rogue. It's really hard to play a fair Assassin Rogue. God, is it hard to play a fair Assassin Rogue, because they're either, you don't have a feature, or your feature is cracked, and there's really very little in between. Yeah, that option probably he's realizing. But alert on that character is like, I guess it's ghoulish overkill, but maybe you definitely take a 20 dex before you take alert. You definitely take like, you already have a +5 to your initiative, and then you're like, okay, I guess then the +5 is good, and you're already you need to be surprising things for them to die anyway to your crits, so like they're not acting the first round initiative regardless, so it's not really a meaningful upside. Maybe you get like 2 actions ish, sure, that you stab, but like you're probably getting that anyway. I don't know, Bob. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, and that is why I'm going to be a little generous with this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and commenters, once again, I'd like to hear your thoughts on alert, because I think it's got potential. I think that that initiative could be used to effectfulness, if that's a word.
Sure.
All right, you got a rating for this one?
It pains me. I'm gonna give this a 3. Yeah, I think that it is, all of the effects on their own wouldn't be worth taking. All of them together, I mean, it's undeniably decent. There will be like +5 bonus to initiative means some fights you will get a full extra turn that your enemies won't. Sometimes it'll put you above someone that's really important. There will be times where that's powerful, and I can't deny that. Most of the time, I don't think it's gonna be a factor at all. You can't be surprised at conscious. If that ever matters, it's very good. But it just is, I don't see it being that relevant that often. Other creatures not getting advantage attack rolls for being unseen by you. That's just good. And all that means it's like a really harmless feat to take. It lands to me kind of like Healer does, where it's like, I just don't know who ever really wants this, and I don't really know that it ever actually gets on a sheet. But when it is on a sheet, it's probably slightly better than an ability score improvement. Probably not a dex ability score improvement, but maybe you're like a full caster and you got 20, and you're like, I don't really need Warcaster, so alert.
And I did not think you were going to give this one a 3. I was expecting
I
a
feel like
2, and
I'd
I
be
was going to give it a
disingenuous
3.
giving it a 2.
I feel I like it a lot better than you do, but not enough to give it a 4. So I'm also going to give it a 3.
There have to be some mediocre things, and I
Yeah.
normally am a big fan of mediocre things. This one I'm not a big fan of, but I can understand this being fine.
All right. Well, that was alert. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. Looking forward to your comments, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it, a gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of The Spell, and other fun things.